The police arrived at 4:51 in the afternoon. I know the exact time because I had been watching the clock on the wall above the nurse's station for the past 20 minutes. The kind of cheap institutional clock, with the second hand that stutters instead of sweeps. And I remember thinking how strange it was that something so trivial, a second hand that can't commit, could hold my attention while my 8-year-old daughter lay 20 feet away with tubes running in and out of her chest. I was still holding my husband Daniel's phone when the officer walked through the ICU doors. Some people in my family still think I went too far that day. I need you to tell me if they are right. The waiting room of the pediatric cardiac unit at St. Aurelius Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio smells like recycled air and hand sanitizer, and the particular silence of people who have agreed, without speaking, not to fall apart in front of each other. There were 4 other families in that room on the afternoon of March 15, 2024. A man in a Carhartt jacket who hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days. A grandmother with a rosary she kept rewrapping around her knuckles. 2 college-age brothers who took turns sleeping across 3 chairs. None of them had chosen to be witnesses to what was about to happen. Neither had I, really. But 11 days in that room changes your relationship to choice. By the time the police officer walked through those doors, I had been awake for most of those 11 days, had consumed more coffee than water, had learned to read every variation in my daughter Lily's oxygen numbers the way a pilot reads instruments in weather, and I had made a decision that I did not yet fully understand, but that felt, in my body, completely correct. The phone was still in my hand. The message was still on the screen. Daniel was standing against the window. He had gone very still in the way that men go still when they are trying to hold a feeling inside a body that is not large enough to contain it. His mother, Renata Voss, my mother-in-law, the woman who had not once in 11 days appeared at this hospital, had sent him a text message at 2:47 in the afternoon while her granddaughter was on a heart-lung bypass machine in the operating room 30 feet down the hall. The message said, "She's not even your real daughter." I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I looked at the message, and something in me went very quiet, and then I stood up from the chair beside Lily's empty bed, walked to the waiting room, and showed it to every person in that room. Let me tell you how we got here. I met Daniel Voss at a fundraising event in Columbus in the spring of 2018. He was 32, I was 31. I had a 4-year-old daughter named Lily who had been born with a congenital heart defect called a bicuspid aortic valve, a condition the cardiologist had been monitoring since she was 6 weeks old. Something we managed with regular appointments and a list of things to watch for, and the particular kind of low-grade vigilance that becomes, over years, simply the texture of your life as a parent. Lily's biological father had left before she turned 1. Not a dramatic exit, no fight, no confrontation. He simply stopped showing up, stopped returning calls, stopped existing in the way that men sometimes decide to stop existing when the reality of a child with a medical history turns out to be different from what they imagined. I had full legal custody. There was no co-parenting arrangement to navigate, no weekend exchanges, no complications. Lily was mine, completely, in every way the law recognized. When Daniel came into our lives, Lily was 4 and suspicious of strangers, and obsessed with a specific stuffed elephant she called Peanut and deeply unimpressed by most adults. She liked Daniel from the 3rd time she met him. I noticed that. I noticed that she let him read to her, that she corrected his voices for the different characters, that she told him her elephant's full name, Peanut Archibald, as though she was conferring an honor. I had been alone with her for 3 years. I understood what it meant when Lily decided someone was safe. Daniel and I were married in September of 2019. He adopted Lily legally in February of 2021, a process that required a home study and background checks, and a court date that I had marked in my calendar 8 weeks in advance, and cried through from beginning to end, while Daniel held my hand and Lily sat between us in a dress she had picked herself, completely unbothered, explaining to the judge that her dad was already her dad, and this was just the paperwork. The judge laughed. He said he wished more cases were that straightforward. So when Renata Voss sent her son a text message reading "She's not even your real daughter," she was not only wrong about the emotional reality of his relationship with Lily. She was wrong about the legal reality. She had been wrong about both for 3 years, and she had never, in those 3 years, bothered to correct herself. This was not a surprise to me. Renata Voss was 64 years old and had lived in the same house in Worthington, Ohio, a house she had inherited from her own mother, for 31 years. She had been widowed when Daniel was 19, and she had arranged her entire identity around that widowhood and around Daniel in ways that had taken me some time to fully map. She was not a loud woman. She did not make scenes at dinners or issue ultimatums over the phone. Her method was quieter. A tone, a pause, a comment delivered so gently that by the time you registered what had been said, she was already changing the subject. The first time I brought Lily to meet her, Lily was 4.5. Renata made a nice lunch. She complimented Lily's dress. She gave her a small stuffed animal, a rabbit, not an elephant, which Lily accepted politely and immediately placed on the couch beside her without naming. After Lily had fallen asleep on the drive home, Renata called Daniel to say what a lovely afternoon it had been and how sweet the little girl was. She used the phrase, the little girl. Not Lily, not your daughter. The little girl, I noticed it. Daniel said I was reading into things. Maybe he was right and I was reading into things. I filed it away and said nothing. The second incident was at Christmas of 2019, 3 months after the wedding. Daniel's extended family, an aunt, 2 cousins, their spouses, had gathered at Renata's house. Lily was 4.5 and wearing a red velvet dress and was almost incandescently excited about a new book she'd received that morning. She had brought it to the table and was attempting to tell Daniel's cousin about the plot. Renata set a hand on Lily's shoulder. Gently, with a smile. "Why don't you go play in the living room, sweetheart? The adults are talking." Lily was not interrupting anything urgent. The adults had been discussing whether it was going to snow. I looked at Daniel. He was watching his mother with an expression I couldn't fully interpret, not agreement, not challenge, somewhere in between. I put my hand over Lily's and said, "She can stay. Tell us about the book, Bug." Lily told us about the book. Nobody objected out loud. Renata did not look at me for the rest of dinner, not angrily. Simply not at all, as though I had ceased to be visible. I understood in that moment the architecture of how this was going to work. I did not say anything. I took Lily home and put her to bed, and then I opened my laptop and sent an email to a financial advisor named Gregory Osai, whom I'd been meaning to contact for 2 months, and I set up the first appointment. If Renata was going to spend the next several years making me feel like a guest in my own family, I was going to spend those years building something she could not touch. The 529 account I opened for Lily the following January already had $14,000 in it by the end of that first year. I did not mention it at Christmas dinner. I should explain what I did for work, because it matters, and because the Voss family had a very specific set of assumptions about it. I was a project manager for a mid-sized construction development firm called Halcyon Group. I had been there since 2016, had moved from coordinator to senior project manager, and by 2022 I was overseeing 3 commercial builds simultaneously with a combined contract value of just over $42 million. I drove a 5-year-old Subaru. I wore the same 4 blazers in rotation. I brought lunch from home. The Voss family knew I worked in construction management. They had understood this, for reasons I never fully untangled, to mean something adjacent to secretary. Renata once asked me, at a family barbecue in the summer of 2020, whether I found it difficult to keep up with the men in my office. I smiled and said it had never come up. I did not mention that I had just closed the contract on a downtown Columbus mixed-use development worth $11.2 million and had been given a bonus larger than Renata's annual income from her rental property on Maple Street, which I knew about because Daniel had mentioned it once, and I had quietly noted the number. The rental property on Maple Street was worth approximately $420,000. Renata had owned it outright since her husband died, and it was, as far as I could tell, the primary source of her financial security outside of her pension. She had never offered anything for Lily's medical expenses. She had never offered anything for Lily at all, financially. When Daniel and I had paid out of pocket for Lily's cardiac monitoring the year our deductible reset, a number that reached $11,000 before our insurance caught up, Renata had sent a card with a Bible verse and a floral border. I did not mention this. I was adding to the 529 account every month. By the end of 2022, it had grown to $41,000. I had done this quietly, through automatic transfers, through a financial plan that Gregory Osai reviewed with me twice a year. It was not money Lily could touch yet. That was for Gregory and for me to manage until she was older. But it was there. It was growing, and it was mine to give her. Renata did not know about it. She also did not know that in October of 2022, I had a 40-minute phone call with a family law attorney named Isabel Carrasco, whose office was in a glass building on High Street and whose hourly rate made me briefly lightheaded. I had called her for a specific reason. I wanted to understand exactly what Renata's legal relationship to Lily was, given that Daniel had adopted her and her biological father had fully relinquished parental rights. Isabel reviewed the adoption decree I sent over and called me back the following morning. "Your mother-in-law," Isabel said, "has no legal standing in relation to your daughter. None. The adoption is clean. The biological father's rights were fully terminated. Your daughter has one set of legal parents, you and your husband." I thanked her. I paid the invoice. I filed the summary notes in a folder I kept on my laptop under a name that would not attract attention. I did not tell Daniel I had made the call, not because I was hiding it. If he had asked, I would have told him, but because I knew what he would say. He would say I was being paranoid. He would say his mother wasn't like that. He wasn't wrong about his mother, not exactly. She wasn't scheming. She wasn't calculating in the way that word implies someone sitting down with a plan. She was something different, a woman who had decided, quietly and completely, that Lily was not really her family, and who had arranged her behavior around that decision so smoothly, so consistently, that she probably no longer recognized it as a decision at all. It had become, for her, simply the truth. That is, in some ways, the most dangerous kind of person. Not someone who acts out of malice, someone who acts out of conviction. The pattern of being treated as an outsider was not dramatic. I want to be honest about that, because when I describe individual incidents, they can sound manageable, dismissible. And in isolation, each one was. It was the accumulation that wore a shape into me, the slow, steady erosion of being present in a family that had decided, without ever quite saying so, that I was provisional. The third incident I remember clearly happened in the spring of 2021, 2 months after the adoption was finalized. Renata had hosted an Easter gathering. There were family photos taken in the backyard, Daniel's aunt with her family, his cousins, Renata in a cream-colored blazer. Lily was 5 by then and had worn a yellow dress and stood between Daniel and me, beaming like she was the centerpiece of everything, which she was. 6 weeks later, Renata sent framed photos to each family member. Daniel received one, his aunt received one, his cousins received one. In every photo, Lily was in the frame. The photo sent to Daniel did not include me. It had been cropped carefully, deliberately, so that the image showed Daniel, Lily, and the open backyard behind them. My arm was still partially visible at the edge, a ghost of a yellow sleeve, because whoever had done the cropping had not been quite careful enough. Daniel brought it home and looked at it for a long moment and then put it face down on the kitchen counter. "I'll talk to her," he said. "Don't," I said, not because I was forgiving it, because I wanted to see what she would do next. He looked at me. "Nora, I mean it, leave it." He left it. And I went to the kitchen table after Lily was asleep, and I opened my laptop, and I reviewed the notes from my call with Isabel Carrasco, and then I started a new document and I wrote down the date, the incident, and what I had observed. Not in an angry way. In the way that a person who has worked in project management for a decade writes things down, methodically, without editorializing, because documentation is not about emotion. Documentation is about what happened and when. That document, over the next 3 years, became 47 pages long. If you have ever been counted out by someone who should have known better, you already know what that specific silence feels like. The one where you see exactly what is happening, and you understand that reacting would only confirm their low opinion of you. So you hold it, you hold it, you hold it, and you build instead. The fourth incident happened in January of 2023. Lily was 7, and she had come home from a checkup with her pediatric cardiologist, Dr. Yemi Adji, with news we had been half expecting for 2 years. The bicuspid valve had reached the threshold where monitoring alone was no longer enough. Dr. Adji wanted to refer us to a surgical team. The likelihood that Lily would need a valve repair or replacement before she turned 10 was, in his assessment, high. I drove home from that appointment holding Lily's hand across the center console, while she described in detail a video she had seen about how penguins keep their eggs warm in Antarctica. Because she was 7 and she had processed the appointment in the way that 7-year-olds process things, with the information going somewhere quiet inside her while the surface of her brain went immediately back to penguins. I made dinner. I helped her with her reading. I put her to bed. After Daniel and I had talked through what Dr. Adji had told us, after we had cried a little, held each other, made the list of questions for the surgical consult, I called Gregory Osai the next morning. I need to increase the monthly transfer to Lily's account, I told him. And I need to talk about her health insurance coverage and whether there's anything we should be changing. Gregory walked me through the options. Lily was on Daniel's insurance through his employer, a mid-sized logistics company. The coverage was solid but had a high out-of-pocket maximum. Gregory suggested I add a supplemental health policy under my own employer's plan to create a secondary layer of coverage. I did it the same week. I also called Isabel Carrasco again, not because I expected a legal battle, not then, not yet, but because I wanted to confirm something. If in the event of any future dispute, Renata Voss decided to claim any kind of standing over decisions about Lily's medical care, I wanted to know exactly where the walls were. She has none, Isabel said, the same as before. Zero standing. Your daughter has 2 legal parents, that's it. I thanked her. I paid the invoice. I added the date to my document. Renata did not call when we told her Lily would need surgery. She texted Daniel to say she would pray for the child, not for Lily. For the child, Daniel read the text and said nothing. His jaw did something, a tightening, a small collapse, and then he put the phone down and went to check on Lily, who was in the living room building something out of a construction set and narrating it aloud to Peanut Archibald. I watched him go. I sat at the kitchen table and I thought about that document on my laptop, 47 pages now, and I thought about Isabel Carrasco's direct number saved in my phone, and I thought about the 529 account that had grown, by January of 2024, to $68,000, and I thought about what Gregory had said at our last meeting, that I had structured things well, that the accounts were clean, that everything was documented. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired. I felt the particular exhaustion of a person who has been building fortifications for years against a threat they hoped would never materialize, and were beginning to suspect was going to materialize anyway. What I did not yet know, what I could not have predicted, even with 47 pages of documentation and Isabel Carrasco on speed dial and $68,000 growing quietly in Lily's name, was that in 8 weeks, my daughter would be in surgery, and my mother-in-law would send a text message, and I would stand up from a chair beside a hospital bed and walk into a waiting room with a phone in my hand, and the architecture of everything I had built would not look like protection anymore. It would look like ammunition. The surgical consultation happened on February 8, 2024. Daniel and I sat across from Dr. Priya Nambiar, the pediatric cardiac surgeon at St. Aurelius who had been recommended by Dr. Adji, and she walked us through the anatomy of Lily's valve with the particular clarity that the best doctors deploy when they are delivering information that is frightening and need you to be able to hear it anyway. She used a model. She used diagrams. She used language that was precise without being cold. Lily, she explained, had reached the point where the valve was restricting blood flow enough to put strain on the left ventricle. The repair window, the period in which a repair rather than a full replacement was viable, was closing. She wanted to schedule surgery before the end of March. I took notes. Daniel held my hand under the table hard enough that I lost feeling in 2 fingers and did not say anything about it. "What's the recovery timeline?" I asked. Dr. Nambiar folded her hands. "Full recovery is typically 8 to 12 weeks. The first 2 weeks are the most critical. She'll be in the ICU for the initial monitoring period. We expect 3 to 5 days if everything goes smoothly, longer if there are any complications." I wrote that down. 8-year-olds, I was learning, do not get the courtesy of uncomplicated timelines. On the drive home, Lily sat in the back seat with Peanut Archibald in her lap and told us she had decided she wanted her hospital room to have a specific kind of poster on the wall, penguins, she specified, not any other animal, and that she wanted a milkshake after surgery, chocolate, and that she was not scared because Dr. Nambiar had really nice shoes and you could tell things about people from their shoes. I looked at her in the rearview mirror. 8 years old and already a better reader of rooms than most adults I knew. "Deal," Daniel told her. "Chocolate milkshake and penguin poster. Both. And Peanut Archibald can stay? Peanut Archibald is non-negotiable," I said. "I'll put it in writing." She laughed. I kept my eyes on the road and did not let my face do what it wanted to do. The weeks between the consultation and the surgery were the kind of weeks that rearrange your internal furniture permanently. You do not move through them the way you move through ordinary time. You move through them the way you move through water, everything slowed, everything with more resistance, every ordinary moment carrying a weight it did not carry before. I took everything off my plate at Halcyon Group that could be moved. My director, a practical man named Quay Massant who had never once in 6 years asked me to explain a personal decision, looked at my project reassignment request, approved it in 4 minutes and said, "Take whatever you need. The Ridgemont build can wait." I had managed 4 of his most complex contracts over the previous 3 years. He knew, without my saying it, that I was not someone who asked for adjustments lightly. I arranged for Lily's school to send her assignments home so she would not fall behind. I spoke with her teacher, a young woman named Ms. Delgado who had taught Lily since September and who understood, in the quiet, efficient way of good teachers, exactly what kind of communication was needed and what kind was not. She sent a handwritten note home with the packet. Lily carried it around for a week. I called Gregory Osai and confirmed that Lily's supplemental health coverage was active and that the policy numbers were documented. He confirmed both and then paused in the way he sometimes did before saying something he considered important. "The account is at $71,400, he told me. "I know that's not what you called about, but I thought you should know the number going into this." I thanked him. There was something steadying about that number, not because money was the point, but because that number represented 5 years of deliberate choices in the face of a family that had made me feel, consistently, like I was building on sand. $71,400 said otherwise. I did not mention the account to Renata. I did not mention the surgery schedule to Renata either, not directly. Daniel called her on a Sunday evening in late February and told her the date. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea I wasn't drinking and listened to his half of the conversation. His voice was careful in the way it got careful when he was managing something. "March 19th, he said. "Dr. Nambert's team sent Aurelius." A pause. "Mom, I know, yes." Another pause longer. "She's doing really well. She's being, you know how she is." He smiled a little. He was talking about Lily. "We'll keep you posted." He came into the kitchen afterward and set the phone face down on the counter. "She said she'll send a card," he told me. I wrapped both hands around my mug. "Okay, Nora, it's okay, Daniel." And I meant it, in the specific way I meant things when I was choosing not to spend energy I needed elsewhere. "It's okay." He looked at me for a moment with an expression I recognized, the one where he understood that I was carrying something and had decided to carry it alone, and he wasn't sure whether to push or let me. He let me. He kissed my forehead and went to check on Lily, who had been reorganizing her bookshelf for the 3rd time that week in a way that I understood, without her saying so, was her version of what I was doing with my mug, holding something, keeping her hands busy, making order in the space she controlled. I sat at the kitchen table until she was asleep. Then I opened my laptop and called Isabel Carrasco's office and left a message asking for a callback. She called the next morning. "I want to understand the full scope," I told her. "Not just Lily's legal status. I want to understand what it would look like, hypothetically, if there were a situation where someone, a family member, outside the immediate household, attempted to insert themselves into decisions about her care." Isabel was quiet for a moment in the way that good lawyers are quiet when they are choosing precision over speed. "Walk me through what you're anticipating." I walked her through it. Not everything, not the 47-page document, not the cropped photograph, not the years of the child and the prayers for the child. I gave her the structure. I gave her what I needed to know. "Your position is airtight," Isabel said when I finished. "Legally, there is no pathway. What you're describing, a non-adoptive, non-guardianship relative, has no standing over medical decisions for your daughter, period. Not in Ohio, not anywhere. If someone attempted to make a scene at the hospital, the medical team would simply not engage with them. They'd be treated as a visitor, not a decision maker. And if they said something publicly, something that constituted harassment or interference, that," Isabel said, and I could hear her leaning forward slightly, "is a different category of conversation. Document everything. If something happens at the hospital, call me directly, not the main office line. I'll give you my cell." She gave me her cell number. I added it to my phone next to her office number, and then I sat for a moment with the phone in my hand, looking at the contact entry, Isabel Carrasco, attorney, and I thought about what it meant that I was sitting in my kitchen 3 weeks before my daughter's open-heart surgery, making notes about legal exposure. I thought about Renata's text saying she would pray for the child. I added the date to my document and closed the laptop. The first close call happened at Daniel's cousin's birthday dinner on the first Saturday of March. It was a gathering of about 12 people at a restaurant in Worthington called Bellacino's, a family-style Italian place, long tables, the kind of setting where everyone talks across each other and nobody has a private conversation. Renata was there. Daniel's aunt, Miriam Voss, was there, a retired school administrator in her late 60s who had always been cordial to me without ever being warm, the distinction being that cordiality costs nothing and warmth requires something. Daniel's cousin Theo and his wife Bet were there. I was there. Daniel was there. Lily was with my mother, who lived 40 minutes away and who understood without extensive explanation that some evenings were easier without a child present. We were midway through the main course when Miriam, unprompted, raised the subject of Renata's house. "I was talking to your mother," she said to Daniel, reaching across the table for the bread, "about what makes sense long-term, with the Maple Street property. Whether it gets folded in or stays separate." Daniel kept his expression neutral. "That's really between Mom and her estate attorney." Renata, at the far end of the table, was watching this conversation with the focused stillness of someone who had staged it. I recognized the look. It was the look of a woman who has decided that something will be discussed tonight regardless of whether the other parties are ready. "It affects the whole family," Renata said, her voice carrying that tone, pleasant, mild, with something underneath it like a load-bearing wall. "These things should be transparent." I lifted my water glass. I took a sip. I set it down. Theo, perhaps sensing something he could not name, steered the conversation toward the birthday cake. The moment passed. Renata picked up her fork. Miriam refilled her wine. Under the table, I typed a note into my phone, March 1st, Bellacino's. Maple Street property raised at family dinner. Renata used the phrase affects the whole family. Daniel present. After dinner, while Daniel was getting the car, Renata appeared at my elbow near the coat check. She had a particular way of appearing without announcement, as though she had simply materialized, as though proximity were something she could decide unilaterally. "How is Lily feeling about everything?" she asked. "The surgery." "She's remarkable," I said. "She's excited about the milkshake afterward." Renata smiled, a real smile, and this was the complicated thing about Renata, the thing that kept people off balance, that she was not entirely cold, that she had real warmth in her somewhere, warmth she reserved for certain things, certain people, a warmth that had never fully extended to include me. "She's a tough little thing." "A tough little thing. Not your daughter, not my granddaughter. A tough little thing." "She really is," I said, and smiled back and did not say anything else. The following Monday morning, I sent an email to Isabel Carrasco summarizing the conversation. Specifically, the phrase affects the whole family in the context of the property discussion. Isabel replied within the hour, "Noted. I've flagged it in your file. Call me after the surgery if anything develops." I called Gregory that same afternoon and asked him to confirm that the beneficiary designations on Lily's account were documented correctly and that the trustee structure was exactly as we had discussed. He confirmed both. I asked him to send me the written confirmation in an email I could file. He sent it before end of day. I was not panicking. I was not even particularly alarmed. I was doing what I had always done, moving forward, quietly, one documented step at a time, while the people around me operated under assumptions about my situation that had not been accurate for years. The second close call happened 12 days before the surgery, on a Tuesday evening when Daniel had a work dinner and I was home alone with Lily. Renata called the house line. We still had a house line because Lily had gone through a phase of preferring to call my mother on it, something about the ritual of dialing, and we had kept it. Renata knew this. She called it specifically. I answered. "I've been thinking," she said, and her voice had the quality it got when she had been rehearsing, "about the hospital, about being there, for Daniel." I noted the framing. "For Daniel." "Of course," I said. "That would be meaningful to him. I thought I might come the night before, stay nearby, be there when it starts." "The surgery's at 6 in the morning," I told her. "We'll be there by 4:30. It's going to be a long day." "I understand that," a beat. "I want to be there for my son." There it was again. The architecture of it, Daniel at the center, Lily and I as surrounding circumstance. I think Daniel would appreciate that, I said, because it was true, and because I was not going to fight this battle on the phone 12 days before my daughter's surgery. I'll let him know you're planning to come. She paused, and in that pause I heard something I had not heard from her before, a slight recalculation, a sense that she had expected more resistance and did not know what to do with its absence. Good, she said. That's settled then. After I hung up, Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, Peanut Archibald tucked under one arm, her hair doing the thing it did at the end of the day where it went in 4 directions at once. Who was that? Grandma Renata. Lily considered this with the particular expression she reserved for information she was sorting. Is she coming to the hospital? She might be. Lily looked at Peanut Archibald. She doesn't have to come to my room, she said, not unkindly, with the pragmatism of a child who has registered, without being told, the precise temperature of a relationship. She can stay in the waiting part if she wants. I looked at my 8-year-old daughter who was 3 days away from her 4th pre-surgical cardiology appointment and who had said this the way she said most things, simply, without drama, as a statement of preference rather than complaint. That's a reasonable plan, I said. Can we have hot chocolate? We had hot chocolate. I helped her with a worksheet about fractions. I put her to bed and went downstairs and called Isabel Carrasco's cell number. She's coming to the hospital, I said. Is she on the authorized contacts list? For Daniel, yes, not for Lily's medical decisions. Good. Make sure the nursing staff knows before surgery day that medical updates on your daughter go only to you and Daniel. Have Daniel confirm it with them directly if possible. That way it's not coming only from you. I told Daniel that same night when he got home. He was quiet for a moment, and then he nodded and said he would handle it with the nursing staff when we arrived. He did. He was, in the ways that mattered most, a good man who loved his daughter, their daughter, and who had spent years trying to mediate a relationship he did not fully understand and could not fix. I did not hold that against him. I held against him only the things that were his to hold. The 3rd close call came 6 days before surgery, and it was the closest. Renata appeared at our house, unannounced on a Saturday afternoon. This was not something she had done before. The dynamic between us had always involved enough restraint for advance notice, and the fact that she had chosen to arrive without calling registered in me as a shift in something, a change in the pressure system. Lily was in the backyard. I could see her through the kitchen window, in her winter coat, staging an elaborate scenario involving Peanut Archibald and a collection of small stones that appeared to have specific designated roles. I watched her for a moment before I opened the front door. Renata came in and stood in the front hall in her good coat and looked around the house with the expression she always used in our house, a careful, neutral survey, the way a person looks at a space they have decided is nice enough but not quite what they would have chosen. I won't stay long, she said. I just wanted to talk to you before everything starts. I offered her tea. She accepted. We sat at the kitchen table while Lily remained visible through the window, completely unaware, narrating something to the stones. I've been thinking about what happens after, Renata said. She wrapped both hands around her mug. The recovery, Daniel will need support, you'll need support, I want to be part of that. We'll have a good support system, I said. I could come and stay for a few weeks. I kept my face calm. That's a generous offer. We'll see what Lily's recovery looks like. Renata looked at the window, at Lily. Something moved across her face, not warmth exactly, more like recognition, the way you might look at something that surprises you by being more real than you expected. It was the humanizing moment I had never quite been able to predict in her. That sometimes, when she didn't know she was being watched, she looked at Lily and something softened. She looks good, Renata said quietly. Considering. She's extraordinary, I said, and I meant it without caveat or performance. She has been extraordinary this entire time. Renata's hand tightened around her mug. I know you love her. The word you landed in a specific way. Not you both. You, as though my love for Lily was the thing under discussion rather than the baseline, the uncomplicated factual ground on which everything else stood. I do, I said. And then, carefully, precisely, in the tone I used when I was saying something I intended to be heard and documented. We both do. Her father loves her completely. She is his daughter, legally, emotionally, in every way. I want to make sure that's understood clearly before the surgery, before the recovery, before any of what comes next. Something shifted in Renata's posture. A fraction, an almost imperceptible adjustment, as though I had said something she had not expected me to say directly. Of course, she said. Her voice was careful. Of course. She left 20 minutes later. I went to the kitchen window and watched Lily rearrange the stones with enormous authority and felt something clarify inside me, a settling, a finality that I recognized, from years of project work, as the feeling that arrives not when a plan is complete but when a plan is irreversible. I had done everything I could do. I had built everything buildable. The accounts were documented, the legal standing was confirmed, the coverage was layered, the record was 47 pages. I called Isabel Carrasco's cell that evening. I had a conversation with her today, I told her. I said directly that Lily is Daniel's daughter in every legal and emotional sense and that I wanted it understood before the surgery. She agreed without pushback. A brief silence. Then, "That's smart. You put it on record conversationally. If anything happens at the hospital, that exchange exists." Another pause. "Nora, try to rest before March 19th. You've done the work." Everything is in order. I thanked her and put the phone down. Lily came inside 20 minutes later with cold cheeks and a complicated theory about which of the stones was the leader and why. And I let her explain the entire governance structure of the stone community while I made dinner. And I listened to every word. And somewhere under the ordinary surface of that evening was the knowledge that in 13 days my daughter was going to be on a table with her chest open and her heart in someone else's hands. And I had done every single thing within my power to protect her, and now there was nothing left to do but wait. The surgery was March 19th. She went in at 6:12 in the morning. I held her hand until the doors to the pre-op area were as far as parents could go, and she looked up at me from the gurney with Peanut Archibald tucked against her side where the nurse had allowed it, and she said, "You'll be right here when I wake up." "Right here," I told her. "First thing you'll see." "And the milkshake, chocolate, already ordered." She nodded, satisfied, with the expression of someone whose arrangements are in order, and they wheeled her through the doors. Daniel put his arm around me and I let him, and we stood there for a moment in the corridor outside pre-op, and then we walked to the waiting room and we sat down, and Renata was already there in the corner chair she had claimed when we arrived, and she was looking at her phone, and she did not look up when we came in. She did not visit Lily's room in the ICU that day. Or the next, or the day after that. On day 4, when Lily had stabilized enough to be moved from acute monitoring to the step-down unit, and I had started sleeping in the chair beside her bed for 3 and 4 hours at a time, I heard from the nurse's station that a woman matching Renata's description had come to the floor, asked for patient information on a Lily Voss, been told that patient information was available only to authorized individuals, and left. On day 6, she called Daniel's phone. I heard his half of it from the doorway of Lily's room. His voice stayed low and controlled, but his hand went to the back of his neck. The gesture I had come to understand over 6 years meant that something was costing him more than he was going to show. He came back in and sat beside me and said, "She asked when they were going to move Lily to a regular room. She wants to visit. She can visit." "I know." He looked at the monitors. "I don't know why she hasn't." I did not say what I thought about why she hadn't. I had been watching Renata operate for 6 years. Visiting meant presence, and presence meant engagement, and engagement with Lily, with the reality of Lily in a hospital bed, wired and monitored and fighting, required Renata to be in the same room with the full weight of her choices about this child, and I did not think she was ready to be in that room. I was wrong about the timing. She came on day 8. She came to the doorway of Lily's step-down room and stood there in her good coat and looked at Lily, who was awake, groggy, watching a nature documentary about Antarctic penguins that Ms. Delgado had found and sent a link for, and something crossed Renata's face that I had not seen before. Not the soft recognition from through the window in my kitchen. Something more fractured, something closer to grief. Lily looked up and said, "Hi," with the amiable unconcern of a child on post-surgical medication who was very interested in penguins. Renata said, "Hi, sweetheart," in a voice that was smaller than her usual voice. She stayed 11 minutes. She did not come back. On day 10, she sent Daniel a text that I did not see. On day 11, on the day that Dr. Nambire's team was preparing the discharge paperwork, on the day that I had been awake for most of the previous 36 hours, and had eaten a protein bar and 2 cups of hospital coffee, and had been sitting beside my daughter's bed watching the monitors settle into the steady, reliable pattern that meant her repaired valve was doing what it was supposed to do, I stepped out to the nurse's station to review a medication instruction, and when I came back, Daniel was standing in the middle of the room holding his phone, His face had done something I did not have a word for. I looked at him. He looked at me. He held out the phone. I took it. I went through the message once. Then again. My eyes landed on each word in the sequence Renata had chosen to arrange them in at 2:47 in the afternoon, while her granddaughter's surgical team was signing off on her discharge from 11 days in a cardiac ICU. SHE's not even your real daughter. I stood there for 3 seconds. Maybe 5. Long enough to feel the message move through me like something being calibrated. Not hot, not cold. Something more precise than either. Something that had a shape and a weight and a specific address. And the address was every single entry in a 47-page document. Every phone call to Isabel Carrasco. Every automated transfer to a $71,000 account. Every moment I had chosen documentation over reaction, preparation over confrontation. Forward motion over the very natural human desire to say to Renata Voss exactly what I thought of her. I had been building toward something, and I had not known exactly what it was until I held her son's phone and went through her message and understood, with complete clarity, that whatever she had intended, whether she intended chaos or proof, or simply the relief of finally saying out loud what she had always believed, she had given me instead the one thing I had not been able to manufacture. She had given me her own words. I set the phone down gently. I stood up from the chair beside Lily's bed. I looked at Daniel, who was watching me with an expression that contained at least 6 different emotions in unresolved tension, and I said, in a voice that did not shake, "I'll be right back." I walked to the waiting room. I want to know if you would have said what I said next, because I still think about it. The waiting room of the pediatric cardiac unit held 5 families on the afternoon of March 19, 2024. And I walked into it holding my son-in-law's, my husband's, phone, and I stood in the center of the room, and I looked at every person in it, and I made a decision that I understood, in the moment I was making it, was permanent. There is a specific quality to permanent decisions. They don't feel dramatic. They feel quiet. They feel like the moment before you step off a curb, the last ordinary instant before motion becomes irreversible. I had been quiet for 6 years. I had documented and planned and built and held my tongue at dinners, and absorbed the phrase "the child," and watched a photograph get cropped and listened to prayers for the child, and filed 47 pages of observations about a woman who had decided, without ever being asked to, that my daughter was adjacent to her family rather than inside it. I had done all of this strategically, deliberately, with the patience of someone who understood that the moment mattered, and the moment had not yet come. And then Renata Voss had sent her son a text message while his daughter was recovering from heart surgery. The moment had come. There were 4 other families in the waiting room. The man in the Carhartt jacket I had been watching for 11 days, the grandmother with the rosary. The 2 college-age brothers, both awake today, sitting forward. A new family I didn't know, a couple my age, the woman still in the clothes she had clearly been wearing since the previous day, both of them with the particular expression of people who had just moved from terror into the first fragile hours of relief. They had not chosen to be here for this. None of them had. But they were here, and I was here, and what Renata had written was on the phone in my hand, and I raised the phone, and I said, in a voice that was steady and clear and louder than my conversational voice, but not loud enough to be called shouting, "I want to show everyone in this room something." The man in the Carhartt jacket looked up. The grandmother stopped her rosary mid-rap. The brothers turned. The new couple looked at me with the careful attention of people who are themselves running on adrenaline and exhaustion and have nothing left to filter the world through. I held the phone up. I rotated it so the screen faced the room. I said, "This is a text message sent 14 minutes ago by my mother-in-law. Sent to my husband. While our daughter," and I said our daughter precisely with full emphasis, "is in the ICU recovering from open-heart surgery." I let them read it. The man in the Carhartt jacket read it and looked away, not out of disinterest, but out of the courtesy of someone who understands that some things require a witness but not a spectator. The grandmother read it and crossed herself. The brothers read it. The older one, I had guessed correctly that he was the older one, set his jaw in a specific way. The new couple read it. The woman's hand found her husband's arm. I said, "This is what she believes about my daughter, who is 8 years old, who has been in this hospital for 11 days, who had her chest opened last week and whose heart was repaired by a surgical team in that building." I gestured toward the doors. And who has a father who has been her father in every legal and emotional sense since she was 4 years old? I lowered the phone. I said this, I added, in the same clear, steady voice, because I needed witnesses, and because I will not pretend, for one more minute, that this is acceptable. I turned and walked back to Lily's room. Daniel was standing in the doorway. He had followed me, I had known he would follow me, had heard his footsteps 20 seconds behind mine, and he had stopped at the threshold and watched me do what I had just done, and his expression contained the 6 unresolved emotions I had seen earlier, plus one new one that I thought might be relief, though I was not certain. I handed him his phone. I walked past him to the chair beside Lily's bed. Lily was asleep. She had fallen asleep during the nature documentary, the tablet tilted sideways on the blanket, the penguin still moving silently on the screen. I sat down. I put my hand over hers. I looked at the monitor above the bed, at the numbers I had learned to read like a second language over 11 days. Heart rate, oxygen saturation, blood pressure, all of them steady, all of them in the ranges Dr. Nambier's team had told me to watch for. All of them fine. Behind me, I heard Daniel make a phone call. His voice was low. After a moment, I heard him say, "No, Mom, no, you need to hear me very clearly right now." I did not turn around. What happened next took 2 hours to fully unfold, and I will tell it in the order that it happened because that is the only order that makes sense. 20 minutes after I showed the message to the waiting room, a nurse came to Lily's room. A steady, no-nonsense woman named Adiz who had been one of the primary nurses on Lily's case for the past week and who had developed, in the way of good nurses, a precise and wordless read on the situation in our family, and told me that a woman at the front desk was asking to come to the floor. "She's on the visitor list," Adiz said. Her tone was informational, without editorial content. But she had come to tell me specifically, not Daniel, and I registered that. "She can come to the waiting room," I said. "Not to this room, not today." Adiz nodded once and went back to the desk. Renata arrived on the floor 7 minutes later. I knew because I heard her voice in the corridor, that controlled, pleasant voice, asking one of the other nurses where the family was. I heard the nurse direct her to the waiting room. I heard Renata's footsteps stop. Then Daniel went out. He had ended his phone call. He walked past me without speaking, touched my shoulder briefly, and went into the corridor. I heard him say, "Mom, come with me." I heard them go to the waiting room. I sat beside Lily. I listened to the monitor. I checked my phone and found a message from Isabel Carrasco that I had not seen, sent 23 minutes earlier, which meant Isabel had heard something already, through what channel I didn't know and didn't need to know. The message read, "I saw the screenshot Daniel forwarded. When you're ready to talk about next steps, call me. Everything we discussed is in order." I put the phone face down on my knee. I looked at Lily sleeping with Peanut Archibald under one arm and the Penguin documentary still running on the tablet. I thought about what next steps meant. I thought about what everything in order meant. I thought about the 47 pages. Then Daniel came back. He stood in the doorway for a moment. He looked at Lily, then he looked at me. "She wants to talk to you," he said. "I know. Nora." His voice had a quality I had only heard a few times in 6 years, stripped of management, stripped of mediation, stripped of the careful engineering he applied to everything involving his mother. Just his voice, tired and cert. "I told her what she did was unforgivable. I used that word. I want you to know that." I looked at him. "I know you did." "I also told her," he stopped. Ran a hand over his face. "I told her that if she wanted any relationship with this family going forward, she was going to sit down with you and she was going to listen." "And what did she say?" He looked at the floor for a moment. "She said she didn't mean it the way it sounded." I stood up. I looked at Lily one more time, the monitors, the numbers, the steady, reliable evidence that her heart was doing what hearts were supposed to do. Then I looked at Daniel. "I'll go talk to her," I said. "But I'm going to need you to understand that the conversation I'm about to have with your mother is not a conversation you're going to be able to moderate." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I know," he said. Renata was sitting in the chair in the corner of the waiting room, not the chair she had occupied for the first 3 days of Lily's hospitalization, which had been near the window, but a different chair, closer to the door, as though she had not fully committed to being in the room. She had her coat folded across her lap. Her hands were clasped on top of it. She had the posture of a woman who had prepared an explanation and was waiting for permission to deliver it. The other families had redistributed. The man in the Carhartt jacket was in the far corner, reading something on his phone, positioned with the particular body language of someone who is absolutely still present, but choosing not to visually confirm it. The grandmother with the rosary had moved to the window. The two brothers were in the seats closest to the corridor, both of them with the careful neutrality of people who had decided that leaving would be more conspicuous than staying. None of them had gone anywhere. I had given them something when I had held up that phone, and they were still holding it. Daniel's Aunt Miriam was also in the room. I had not known she was coming. She had not been here in the previous 11 days, and her presence told me that Renata had called her between sending the message and arriving on the floor. Miriam sat 2 chairs away from Renata, upright, hands in her lap, in the posture of a woman who had arrived expecting to be useful and was recalibrating. This was the enabler, the person who had always smoothed things over, who had always found the interpretation that made Renata's behavior reasonable, who had taken the role for so long she had forgotten she'd chosen it. I sat down across from Renata. I did not say anything immediately. I let the silence have the weight it had earned. Renata's composure was intact, but something underneath it was working hard. She looked at me with the expression she had always used for me, the careful, neutral survey, but it had a quality today it had never had before, which was uncertainty. She had always known exactly how I would respond to her. I had made sure of that. For 6 years, I had responded with calm and documentation and the kind of restraint that looks, from the outside, like accommodation. She did not know what I was going to do now. "I want to explain," she began. I let her. I was upset. Her voice was measured. I was sitting here in this room, watching my son, go through the worst 11 days of his life, and I felt, she paused, chose her next word with care. "Peripheral," she said. I felt peripheral. And I sent something I should not have sent in a moment of pain, and I understand that it was hurtful. She had chosen well. Peripheral was good. Peripheral acknowledged the problem while repositioning it as a symptom of her own suffering rather than a statement of belief. It was the move of a woman who had spent a long time managing impressions. I waited until I was certain she was finished. Then I said, "Renata, do you understand that Lily is Daniel's legal daughter?" She blinked. "Of course." That the adoption was finalized in February of 2021. That her biological father's parental rights were fully and permanently terminated. That Daniel is, in every legal sense that exists, her father. "Yes, I know that." Then what you sent was not a moment of pain. My voice was still even. I had not raised it. I had no need to. It was a statement about something you believe, and I need to know whether that's true. Renata's hands tightened on her folded coat. "I love Daniel. I didn't ask about Daniel." The interruption was gentle, surgical. "I asked about Lily." The room was very quiet, not the dramatic, all-consuming quiet of a theatrical moment, just the ordinary quiet of a space where several people have stopped pretending not to listen. Miriam stirred in her seat. "I think what Renata is trying to say..." "Miriam," I looked at her. "I need to have this conversation with Renata directly. I'd appreciate if you let her answer." Miriam's mouth closed. She sat back. This was the first time in 6 years I had asked her to stop redirecting, and the fact that she complied immediately told me something I had long suspected, that the redirecting had not been loyalty. It had been reflex. The reflex of a woman who had spent decades managing Renata's collateral damage because it was easier than confronting it. Renata looked at me. Something in her face had shifted, the careful neutrality giving way to something more effortful, something that was working harder to maintain itself. "She's not," she started. She stopped. "Say it," I said, not cruelly, simply. "You've been saying it for 6 years with everything except the words. You said it with the photograph. You said it with the prayers for the child. You said it when you stayed away from this hospital for 11 days while she was in the ICU, and you said it in the message. So say it out loud, to my face, and let's stop pretending you haven't been saying it." The silence that followed that was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a thing being held up to a light it had never been held up to before, and everyone in the room could see what the light showed. The grandmother with the rosary had fully turned from the window. The man in the Carhartt jacket was not looking at his phone anymore. Renata's chin lifted slightly. Old reflexes. The posture of a woman who has always been the one setting the terms. "She is not my blood. I am sorry if that is difficult to hear. But it is the truth of what I feel, and I will not be made to feel ashamed of it." There it was. I had waited 6 years for those words, and now that they were in the room, they were exactly what I had expected them to be. Small and certain and completely wrong. Not morally wrong, though they were that. Wrong in the factual, documented, institutional sense that I had spent 6 years preparing for. I looked at her for a moment. Then I reached into the pocket of my jacket and took out my phone. I have something I'd like you to look at, I said. The first thing I showed her was the adoption decree. I had photographed the key page, the one with the court seal, the date, the judge's signature. The language that stated, in the straightforward syntax of Ohio family law, that Lily Voss was the legal daughter of Daniel Voss with all attendant rights, responsibilities, and protections, and that the prior parental rights of her biological father had been permanently and irrevocably terminated. And I had that photograph saved in a dedicated folder that I had labeled. With the economy of someone who has learned to keep things findable, simply, Lily, I held the phone out to Renata. She looked at it the way people look at things they have already decided not to accept. Her eyes moved over the document with the careful non-engagement of someone who is reading something, but telling themselves they are not. I know she was adopted, she said. That isn't what I know you know. I took the phone back. I showed you that because I want the conversation to begin from a factual foundation. She is his daughter, full stop. What I want to talk to you about now is not the legal question because the legal question is settled. What I want to talk to you about is the 47-page document on my laptop. Renata's posture shifted. A small thing, a recalibration. Miriam looked up. What document? Renata's voice was still controlled, but the control was load-bearing now in a way it hadn't been 2 minutes ago. A record, I said, that I have been keeping since March of 2020. Every incident, every comment, every pattern of behavior that I observed and documented with dates, locations, and where applicable, witnesses. I paused. Every family gathering where Lily was excluded or diminished. Every conversation in which she was referred to as the child instead of by name. Every absence, the photograph that was cropped, the hospital visits that didn't happen. I let those land. 47 pages. The older of the two brothers across the room had leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Renata looked at me steadily. You've been writing things down about me? About a pattern of behavior, yes. I kept my voice completely even. I began keeping that record after I consulted with a family law attorney named Isabel Carrasco in October of 2022 to understand the legal landscape of our situation. Isabel has been advising me since then. She knows about today. She has a copy of the text message Daniel forwarded to her this afternoon. The atmosphere in the room changed in the way that atmospheres change when a previously private conversation becomes suddenly, legibly official. Miriam's hands came off her lap. She placed them on the armrests of her chair. Renata's voice, when it came, had lost its pleasantness without yet finding anything to replace it. You've had an attorney since 2022, yes. I kept the phone on my knee, not threatening, present. Isabel's view, which she has stated clearly and repeatedly, is that you have no legal standing in relation to my daughter, no standing over her medical decisions, no standing over her custody, no standing over her financial welfare, a breath, and no standing to contest the structures I have built to protect her. What structures? It wasn't quite a question. It was the sound of someone feeling a floor they were standing on beginning to be less solid than they had believed. If you are still here, hit like. I need to know you saw that. I looked at Renata. For the past 5 years, I have been making monthly contributions to a college savings account established in Lily's name. As of this month, that account holds $71,400. It is managed by a financial advisor named Gregory Osai, structured correctly for her benefit, with me as trustee. It is documented, it is growing, and it is completely outside any claim or influence from anyone outside our immediate family. The silence after that was a different quality again, not the silence of exposure, but the silence of scale, the silence of people adjusting their mental map of a situation they thought they understood. Renata looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, something that would resolve into anger later, but was not there yet. What was there right now was the specific expression of someone who has been operating under a confident set of assumptions and has just had those assumptions removed, cleanly, one by one, the way you remove load-bearing objects from a structure and watch it understand, piece by piece, what it was resting on. You built all of this, Renata said slowly. You were planning. I was protecting my daughter. My voice did not change. That's what parents do. Miriam made a sound, not a word, something shorter, and then appeared to decide against saying whatever she had been about to say. Renata's chin lifted again, but it was different this time. The old reflex, but with something desperate in it now. You've been building a case, against me, for years, while sitting at my table. while letting me think. What did you think, Renata? I asked, not unkindly, with genuine curiosity or something that resembled it. What did you think was happening while you were praying for the child and sending the card and cropping my arm out of the photograph? The man in the Carhartt jacket had put down his phone entirely. Renata's voice, when it came, was the most honest it had been in the 6 years I had known her. Stripped of the pleasantness, stripped of the management, stripped down to something that was still wrong but was at least real. I thought, she said carefully, that eventually Daniel would understand that his real family. I heard the words leave my mouth with the particular weight of something that has been held for a very long time and has finally been set down. His real family is in that room down the hall. His daughter, our daughter, who has been his daughter in every way that matters since she was 4 years old and told him her stuffed elephant's full name. That is his real family. And if you have spent 6 years believing otherwise, then these last 6 years have been a very expensive mistake. Renata opened her mouth. I held up one hand, not aggressive, a stop signal. I'm not finished. She closed her mouth. The text message you sent today will be added to the 47-page document. Isabel has a copy, Daniel has a copy. I paused. And there are currently 6 people in this room who saw me show it publicly, at my own initiative, because I decided that the era of private documentation was over. I looked around the room, not performing, simply acknowledging the witnesses I had acquired, these strangers who had been sitting in this room for 11 days with their own impossible situations, and who had, without being asked, become part of mine. I want to be completely clear about what happens now. Renata had gone very still. Not the strategic stillness of a woman composing herself. The stillness of a woman who has understood, possibly for the first time, that the conversation she believed she was having and the conversation she was actually having were not the same conversation. Miriam looked between us. Then she did something I had not expected. She looked at her hands, not at Renata, at her own hands. And she said, quietly, addressing no one in particular, I should have said something. Years ago. I should have said something? Renata turned to look at her. Miriam did not look up. You know I should have, you know what you've been doing, and I helped you do it by never saying it out loud. The room absorbed that. The grandmother by the window had her rosary completely still in her hands. The brothers were both watching Miriam with the careful attention of people who recognize a significant moment without knowing all of its context. Renata looked back at me. Her voice had the specific tightness of a person holding something in. What do you want? I want you to understand, I said, that my daughter is not provisional, she is not adjacent, she is not the child, she is Lily Voss, she is 8 years old. She had open heart surgery 11 days ago, and she is going home tomorrow, and her father will be holding her hand in the car, and her penguin poster is coming off that wall and going home with us, and her stuffed elephant is in the bed beside her right now. She is his daughter, and she is my daughter, and she is your granddaughter whether you have been willing to call her that or not. I paused. And I need you to decide, right now, in this room, in front of these people, whether you are in her life going forward or you are not. Because those are the only 2 options I am offering, and there is no third option where things continue the way they have been. Renata looked at me for a long moment. The careful survey, one final time. And I saw something happen in her face that I had not seen before and will not claim to fully understand. A kind of reckoning, something slow and private moving behind her eyes, something that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with what she had built for herself over 64 years, and what she had just understood, sitting in a hospital waiting room in a good coat with her hands on her folded lap. It had cost her. She did not answer immediately. The man in the Carhartt jacket across the room cleared his throat. He looked at Renata with the straightforward, unperforming expression of a man who has been sitting in a hospital for 2 weeks with his own suffering and has used it up and has nothing left but directness. Ma'am, he said, your granddaughter is down the hall. Renata looked at him. He looked back. He did not look away. She looked back at me. I waited. I was wrong, she said. The words came out separately, each one placed deliberately like something being handled with care because it is fragile and she was not sure it would survive rough treatment. About the way I have treated her, about what I told myself about her. She stopped, her hands on the coat in her lap pressed flat. I don't know if that is enough. It isn't, I said, but it's a beginning. The corridor outside the waiting room door had gone quiet. And then, from somewhere behind me, I heard a familiar voice, small and hoarse and slightly slurred with sleep medication, say, Mom! I turned. Lily was standing in the doorway in her hospital gown, Peanut Archibald hanging from one hand, her hair doing its four-directional end-of-day thing, her IV line trailing from her left arm to the pole she was pulling behind her like a companion. Adiz was 2 steps behind her, with the expression of a nurse who has just discovered that her patient has made a unilateral decision to go for a walk. "I woke up," Lily informed the room. "And Dad was gone, and you were gone, and Peanut Archibald wanted to know where everyone was. I'm right here, Bug." I crossed to her and took her free hand. She let me, leaning against my side with the unself-conscious weight of a child who knows exactly which person in any room is the one they are safe against. She looked at Renata. Renata looked at her. 8 years old, post-surgical, IV line, four-directional hair, stuffed elephant, and the absolute uncomplicated clarity of a child who has decided to address a thing directly. "You didn't come visit me," Lily said to Renata, not accusatory, factual. "I was here a long time." Renata's face did something complicated. "I know," she said. "I'm sorry, Lily." Lily considered this. She looked at Peanut Archibald, then back at Renata with the particular expression of someone weighing a piece of new information against a prior assessment. "Okay," she said, and then, because she was 8 and had processed what she needed to process and was ready to move on to the next thing, "Can we get the milkshake now? I've been asking about the milkshake for 3 days." I looked at her. "Tomorrow," I said, "when we go home. But I want it now. The milkshake is tomorrow." She leaned heavier against me and addressed this grievance to Peanut Archibald. Adiz appeared at her other side with the practiced calm of someone who has escorted many small patients back to their rooms. I had one more thing to say. I looked at Renata over Lily's head. "I have a meeting with Isabel scheduled for April 2nd, I said. "If you want to be part of what comes next, if you want a genuine relationship with this family, you will need to be present for a conversation about how that looks going forward. Not managed, not on your terms, on terms that put Lily first." I let that settle. "Daniel will tell you the time and location. The choice is yours." I walked Lily back to her room. Adiz got Lily settled back into the bed with the efficient gentleness of someone who has done this 10,000 times and has not lost the care in it. She checked the IV line, checked the monitors, made a note on her tablet, and then paused at the door on her way out and looked at me with the expression of a woman who has seen a great deal in the rooms of a pediatric cardiac unit and has learned to recognize when something significant has just shifted. "She needs rest," Adiz said. "And so do you." "I know. The milkshake," Lily said from the bed, eyes already closing. "Tomorrow," Adiz and I said at the same time. Lily's mouth curved. She pulled Peanut Archibald tighter and was asleep within 3 minutes. I sat in the chair beside her. I had been holding my breath through most of the past hour. I let it out slowly, all of it, a long, quiet exhale that felt like something structural releasing. My hands had stopped their low internal trembling, the vibration I had been carrying since I first went through that text message. And I held them flat on my knees for a moment and looked at them. These hands that had built something quietly for 5 years, that had signed contracts and typed 47 pages and held a phone up in a waiting room and held my daughter's hand through 11 days of monitors and numbers and penguin documentaries. They were steady. Daniel came in 20 minutes later. He sat in the chair on the other side of Lily's bed. He looked at her for a long time and then he looked at me. "She's leaving," he said. "Miriam is taking her home." "Okay? Nora." He leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped. He had the look of a man in the middle of a reordering, something internal being moved into a different configuration. "I need to say something." I waited. "I knew," he said. "Not everything. Not the document or Isabel or the account, not the specifics. But I knew something was wrong and I kept finding reasons to manage it instead of confront it." He looked at the floor. "Because she's my mother and it was easier to tell myself you were both, that it was manageable, that it would resolve on its own." He looked up. "It wasn't manageable, and it didn't resolve." "No," I agreed. "It didn't. I'm sorry." I looked at him, this man who loved his daughter, who had told his mother her behavior was unforgivable, who had not always been what I needed him to be, but who was sitting across from me in a hospital room at 8:47 in the evening, after 11 days, being honest. "I know," I said. "We'll talk, after she's home and settled and the milkshake has been acquired." Something in his face loosened. Not resolution, it was too early for resolution, but the beginning of it. "The milkshake," he said, "it's non-negotiable at this point." He looked at Lily, his daughter. "Yeah," he said softly, "it really is." The police had arrived at 4:51, and now, 3 hours later, I sat in a different chair in the same building and thought about what that had meant. A nurse, not a Dees, one of the others. A young man named Combe who had the slightly startled quality of someone still in his first year on the unit, had called security when I had held up the phone and spoken to the waiting room. Security had called the non-emergency line as a precautionary measure, because a visibly distressed family situation in a pediatric ICU is the kind of thing that institutions manage carefully, and the officer who arrived, a woman named Officer Darnell, calm, thorough, about 40, had come to Lily's room first and knocked gently and introduced herself and asked if I wanted to make a formal report. I had looked at her for a moment. I had thought about Isabel. I had thought about 47 pages. I would like to document the incident, I said, and I would like a copy of that documentation. Officer Darnell had taken the report with the methodical efficiency of someone for whom family conflict in hospital waiting rooms is an established category of human experience. She had photographed the text message on Daniel's phone, he handed it over without being asked, and had spoken briefly with two of the other families in the waiting room, the man in the Carhartt jacket and the grandmother with the rosary, both of whom confirmed what I had said and what I had shown. She had noted Renata's name and contact information, provided by Daniel, and had explained that the report would be on file. "Is there anything you want to pursue formally?" Officer Darnell asked. I had thought about that. "Not tonight," I said, "but I want it documented. I want it real." "It's real," she confirmed. "It's on record." She had left. And then the confrontation had happened, and Lily had walked in with Peanut Archibald and her IV pole, and Renata had said "I'm sorry," Lily with a voice that was smaller than her usual voice, and I had said what I had needed to say about April 2nd, and I had walked my daughter back to her room. I forwarded Officer Darnell's badge number and the incident report reference to Isabel that night from the chair beside Lily's bed, at 11:12 in the evening, while Lily slept and Daniel dozed in the other chair, and the monitors made their steady, reliable sounds. Isabel replied at 11:29. "Perfect. This is the foundation. See you April 2nd. The meeting on April 2nd happened in Isabel's office on High Street, on a Tuesday morning, with Daniel and me on one side of the table and Renata on the other and Isabel at the head. Renata had come. I had not been certain she would. She arrived 7 minutes early, in her good coat, and she sat where she was directed, and she did not attempt to manage the room. Isabel Carrasco was 51 years old, precise and unhurried, with the particular quality of a lawyer who has spent enough years in family court to be genuinely unsurprisable. She reviewed the situation plainly. The documented pattern, the incident report from March 19th, the text message, the 47-page record which she had gone through in full, and the legal framework within which any future relationship between Renata and our family would need to operate. "There are no current legal proceedings," Isabel said. "Nora has chosen not to pursue a harassment filing at this time. That is a choice she can revisit. What we are here to establish today is a clear understanding of Renata's standing, which is as follows. She is Daniel's mother and therefore a family connection by extension, but she has no legal relationship to Lily Voss, no decision-making authority, no custody rights, and no standing to contest any aspect of Lily's care, finances, or upbringing." She looked at Renata directly. "That is not a threat. It is a description of the legal reality. If it is understood and accepted, a path forward is possible. If it is not, Nora has everything she needs to make the alternative significantly less pleasant." Renata listened to all of this. She did not look at her hands. She looked at Isabel, and then she looked at me and she said, "I understand." "Good," Isabel said. "Then let's talk about what a relationship with your son's family looks like from here." That conversation took an hour and a half. I will not detail every exchange, because some of it was still in process, the kind of halting, imperfect negotiation that happens when people are trying to build something new out of the wreckage of something old, and the building is not clean and the wreckage is still visible. What came out of it was not warmth. Not yet, and possibly not ever, in the form it should have been from the beginning. What came out of it was a set of terms, explicit, mutual, stated aloud and documented, that put Lily at the center, that required Renata to use her name, that established the conditions under which she would or would not be included in our family's life. She agreed to all of it. Whether that agreement would hold, Whether the woman who had believed for 6 years that my daughter was not real family could genuinely reorder that belief, I did not know. What I knew was that she had been given a clear choice, in a clear room, with a clear record behind it, and she had chosen yes. That was not nothing. It was not everything. It was a beginning, and I was willing to let it be a beginning. Lily went home on March 20th. We stopped for the chocolate milkshake on the way, at a drive-thru because she was not yet supposed to be in public spaces, and she held the cup in both hands in the back seat with the gravity of someone receiving an honor long deferred, and she took one long sip and said, "It's perfect." Not enthusiastically, definitively. The way she said things when a thing had met its exact specifications. Daniel caught my eye in the rearview mirror. We drove home. In the months that followed, several things happened in the order that they happened. Renata did not come to stay during Lily's recovery. That offer, which had been made before the surgery in a form that had felt more like an assertion than a question, was not renewed, and I did not extend it. Daniel's cousin Theo called once to ask what had happened, and Daniel told him, simply and without drama, and Theo was quiet for a moment and then said, "I figured it was something like that. I've known something was wrong for a long time." He did not explain why he had never said so. I did not ask. Some people need the thing to become undeniable before they can name it. Theo was that kind of person. That was his to reckon with. Miriam called me in early April. I answered, which I'll admit surprised me slightly. She spoke carefully, without preamble. "I said something true in that room. I should have said it years before. I don't expect you to, I just needed you to know that I am aware of what I contributed." I thanked her. We talked for 11 minutes. It was not a transformation. It was an honest conversation between two women who had been performing a different kind of conversation for years, and that honesty was, by itself, more valuable than all the managed pleasantness that had preceded it. The incident report from March 19th remained on file with the Columbus Police Department. Isabel had it. I had it. It did nothing further because it did not need to. Its existence was the point. The Maple Street rental property that Miriam had raised at dinner in March was, I learned through Daniel in June, in the process of being liquidated. Renata had decided, with guidance from her own estate attorney, a decision entirely hers, made without any legal pressure from me, to simplify her financial situation. The property sold in August for $411,000. What she did with the proceeds was her business. I noted the number and closed the file in my head. Lily's 529 account, by September of 2024, had reached $86,000. Gregory sent me the quarterly statement with a single line of commentary in his email. Growth is on track. I filed the statement and thought about Lily explaining the governance structure of a rock community to me on a Tuesday night in February, and about the hospital bed, and about the monitors, and about her voice saying it's perfect over a chocolate milkshake. $86,000 toward a future that she had nearly not had. That was what those monthly transfers had always been. Not a statement, not a strategy. Just a parent doing the stubborn, quiet work of building toward a life they intend for their child to have. Dr. Nambair cleared Lily at her 6-month follow-up in September. Her valve was functioning within normal parameters. She could return to full activity, including the swim lessons she had been waiting on and had mentioned approximately 400 times since leaving the hospital. She started swim lessons in October and came home from the first session soaking wet, and with strong opinions about which lane was the correct lane and a detailed theory about the aerodynamics of flip turns that she explained to Peanut Archibald at the dinner table, while Daniel and I sat across from each other and did not look at each other. Because if we looked at each other, we were going to cry, and Lily would want to know why, and neither of us was ready to explain the specific texture of relief that looks like an 8-year-old lecturing a stuffed elephant about swimming. She is thriving. I want to say that plainly, without ornament, because it is the most important sentence in this entire story. She is thriving. Renata came to Lily's birthday party in November. She sat at the end of the table and she called her Lily, every time, without prompting, and she brought a gift, a book about penguins, which Lily received with the specific expression of someone whose preferences have been correctly identified and who is genuinely pleased about it. It was not a healed relationship. It was not warmth. But Lily looked at her across the birthday cake and said, "Thank you, Grandma Renata," and Renata said, "You're welcome," and something that had been broken was, in some small degree, being attended to. That was enough. Not everything. Enough. I do not spend time being angry anymore. I spent a lot of years being strategic when I wanted to be angry, and then I spent the day in that waiting room being something that was neither strategy nor anger, but was instead the specific force of a person who has had enough. And then the anger resolved itself into paperwork and meetings and a police report and a conversation in Isabel's office. And now it is mostly just over. Not forgotten. Over. I still have the 47-page document on my laptop. I have not deleted it. I do not open it. It is there the way a scar is there, not a wound anymore, not useful, just evidence that something happened and that I survived it and that I built something durable enough to survive it with. My mother asked me in December whether I regretted doing what I did in the waiting room, whether I regretted showing the message to strangers, whether I thought it had been too much. I thought about the man in the Carhartt jacket, the grandmother with the rosary, Officer Darnell writing down Renata's name, Miriam looking at her hands, Lily standing in the doorway with Peanut Archibald and an IV pole saying you didn't come visit me. I was here a long time. I do not regret it. Not 1 second of it. I needed witnesses, and I made some, and what happened after happened because those witnesses existed. But I think about my mother's question. I think about whether there is a version of that afternoon where I made a different choice, a quieter one, and whether that choice would have led somewhere better or just somewhere different. I am genuinely not sure. So I will ask you. I showed a private message to a waiting room full of strangers in a hospital while my daughter was recovering from heart surgery. Was that too far, or was it exactly far enough? Tell me in the comments.